Everyone has a different definition of the term legend. Some think artists have to possess longevity to be considered a legend. Some think an artist has to have a certain number of hits to be a legend. Some think you have to be skilled vocally. Some think intricate choreography and technique is required. Some think versatility makes a legend. And sometimes a combination of all of the aforementioned is required for some to even consider an artist to be a quote-unquote legend. Mariah Carey is objectively a legend. She's had longevity, she's had the hits, she has the voice, and not to mention her pen that is unmatched. Mariah Carey is honestly in a category all her own. Debuting in 1990, she was seen as the new girl when it came to other legends like Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Janet Jackson, and Madonna, all of whom were already global superstars by then. However, at the same time, she came well before modern heavy hitters like Beyonce, Rihanna, Usher, and Britney Spears, all of which cited Mariah as a source of inspiration in one way or another. The point I'm trying to make is that Mariah Carey has gone toe-to-toe with both of these groups and still managed to top charts and stay relevant throughout a staggering 3 decades at this point. What other artists in history can say that they've had #1 hits on the chart at the same time as both Michael Jackson and Beyonce in their prime? No matter how you slice it, Mariah Carey is a living legend. In 1995, Mariah released her 5th studio album, Daydream. This album was significant in many ways for her as it was the start of a shift in her career, musically, vocally, personally, and professionally. Up to this point, Mariah's image in music was heavily guided by her label Columbia, as well as her then husband Tommy Mottola, who was head of Sony Music at the time, the parent company of her label. Mottola was particularly heavy-handed when it came to controlling every aspect of Mariah's career. When it came to her sound prior to Daydream, Mariah remained in the pop sphere, making music that generally appealed to the masses. Despite her love for R&B and hip-hop, both her label and Mottola insisted on her staying in the pop lane. Daydream was a key album in the evolution of Mariah Carey as it was her first step into the urban space, music that she loved but was never allowed to make herself. While her label was far more lenient with her when it came to making music by this point, they were still hesitant to allow her to stray too far from the formula that had brought her so much success with her first 4 albums. On May 23, 1995, Fantasy was released as the lead single from Daydream. In an unprecedented move at the time for a primarily pop act, Mariah went against the desires of her label and enlisted rapper Old Dirty Bastard to provide rap verses for the song's remix. Her label feared the decision was way too left field and feared it would ruin the success of the album. Despite all of this, Fantasy became the first single by a female artist to debut at #1 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and went on to top the chart for 8 weeks, as well as becoming the second best-selling single of 1995. In addition to this, the Fantasy remix successfully allowed Mariah to cross over into the hip-hop urban market, as this remix is often credited with popularizing pop and hip-hop crossovers, starting the trend of many pop artists putting rappers on their songs to generate crossover appeal. The second single, One Sweet Day, featuring Boyz II Men, topped the chart for 16 weeks and became the longest-running #1 single in Billboard's history, holding the record for 23 years until it was broken by Lil Nas X's Old Town Road in 2019. Daydream's 4th single, Always Be My Baby, reached #1 as well. Altogether, the singles from Daydream spent a combined 6 whole months at the top of the Hot 100. It was apparent that Mariah's dip into the more urban sound that she desired did not slow down her success in the slightest, despite what her label thought. Daydream had been the most involved in her music that Mariah had ever been up until that point, something that was hard to do when those above her and her own husband exerted so much control over everything in her life, both personally and professionally. Despite having more control and creative input than ever, she was still forced to submit to the wishes of executives regarding Daydream. It is implied that Mariah wanted the album to delve even further into a more R&B direction, but her label insisted she remain a middle-of-the-road pop act. The fan-favorite B-side song Slipping Away backs up this theory, as Mariah confirmed that her label wouldn't allow her to put it on Daydream because it was quote-unquote too R&B. This is odd considering songs like Melt Away and Long Ago are very much R&B, but regardless, the album was a step in the direction that Mariah ultimately wanted to go. Daydream was the first step towards Mariah Carey defining her own musical identity beyond the carefully curated one that was laid out for her. It was only natural that for her next release she would want to push things even further. She wanted to be completely involved in the process of creating her next album. She wanted it to be authentic. She wanted to be free of the stifling control that her label had over her. The result would become both Mariah's Magnum Opus as well as one of the greatest R&B records of all time. That album was Butterfly.
Well, it's more so, I mean, the song Butterfly itself was just a very important song for me. And I just feel like as a ballad, it's one of the most personal ballads that I've written, and like the vocal performances. It was just a real kind of emotional performance. I did it down in the Bahamas, and it was just really feeling free and all that. So the whole thing was like a cathartic experience. So it just seemed appropriate to entitle the album Butterfly. Not that I wasn't involved in the past. I mean, I've always written my songs, but it was like this time I had the ability to really make the choices that what I wanted to do. Like a lot of people would kind of scare me out of doing things that I might want to do. Like if you do this, you might alienate this audience, or you might go too far in this direction, or you might be, you know, just getting a little bit nutty on us, whatever. Like what are you thinking with this old dirty bastard scenario? And I'm like, look, you know, it's not that deep. People can understand all types of music.
Absolutely.
So I just feel like this time around, instead of just it being like a remix thing where I could really, you know, do different things and do different collaborations, I tried to incorporate that into the album. So to me, it's not a drastic change. It's really who I really am, and I'm glad that it's being able to be shown.
If Daydream was a shift for Mariah Carey, then Butterfly is a declaration of independence for a woman who had essentially been controlled for her entire career up until that point. Butterfly continued the shift that began with Daydream, with Mariah having full control over the album's direction and who she chose to work with. Many saw Mariah's new creative team as a form of revenge against her heavy-handed label. In a major departure from her previous work, Mariah enlisted the talents of hip-hop heavy hitters like Diddy, who went by Puffy back then, Missy Elliott, Q-Tip, and Bone Thugs and Harmony. Many criticized her for her choices of collaborators, but Mariah remained determined to make the music that she wanted to make, free from any restrictions. And that's ultimately what Butterfly represents. It represents freedom in more ways than one. Freedom from control of her label, freedom from a controlling and emotionally abusive marriage, creative freedom, freedom to do what she wanted with her talent. Mariah's newfound independence was even apparent in her style. Prior to the Butterfly era, many of Mariah's public appearances showed her mostly covered up and dressed modestly. However, this time around, Mariah dressed far more provocatively, in essence reclaiming her womanhood and declaring she was free to be who she wanted to be. This was apparent in everything during this era: her music videos, her public appearances, and even the album's artwork. Honey serves as the opening track on Butterfly, as well as the lead single, being released on July 29, 1997. While Fantasy subtly pushed Mariah into crossover territory, Honey was regarded by many to be a career-redefining song and was the best choice for both a lead and an album opener for Butterfly, in my opinion. The song received critical acclaim by many, especially due to its authenticity. Not many give her credit for this, but Mariah's transition to the hip-hop sound never felt forced. I've always admired her for how she was able to float on tracks with some of the roughest and toughest rappers in the industry and never once seem out of place. Co-written with rappers Sean Puffy Combs and Q-Tip, the song reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making Mariah the artist with the most singles to debut at the top of the chart, a record she held for 23 years until it was broken by Ariana Grande. The song's music video garnered just about as much attention as the song itself, as it showcased Mariah showing more skin than ever before. Costing $2 million to make, the video is one of the most expensive music videos ever made. Despite pushing herself in such a new direction with Honey, the next single released from Butterfly would ultimately be a return to form for Mariah. The title track was released as the second single on September 29, 1997. A pop and R&B ballad with elements of gospel, it is one of my personal favorites when it comes to Mariah's ballads. The song was originally conceived as a house record titled Fly Away. However, after Mariah realized how personal the lyrics were, she rewrote the song as a ballad. It was 97 and I was leaving my marriage, which encompassed my life. I was writing the song Butterfly, wishing that that's what he would say to me. There's a part that goes, I have learned that beauty has to flourish in the light. Wild horses run unbridled, or their spirit dies. You have given me the courage to be all that I can, and I truly feel your heart will lead you back to me when you're ready to land. At that point, I really believed that I was going to go back to the marriage. I didn't think I was going to leave forever, but then the things that happened to me during that time caused me not to go back. Had it been, go be yourself, you've been with me since you were a kid, let's separate for a while, I probably would have. Retitling the song Butterfly, it was Mariah's favorite and most personal ballad at that point, describing it as the best ballad she's ever written. She wrote the lyrics from the point of view of her soon-to-be ex-husband, wishing those were the things he would say to her before the end of their marriage. Butterfly is the epitome of its parent album. The original house version of the song would still make its way onto the album in the form of Fly Away Butterfly Reprise, which would serve as a sort of remix. The single did not fare as well as Honey, however, due to the song not receiving an official commercial release. Mariah had an ongoing conflict with her label at the time, no doubt in some way attributed to the recent separation from her husband. It peaked outside of the top 20 in most countries, including the US. Breakdown was released as a third single from Butterfly in the US on January 1998 and is hands down one of my all-time favorite songs. The song received heavy rotation on the radio even before its official release, leading to the decision to push it as a third single. A slow, mellow hip-hop and R&B groove, it is truly a gem in Mariah's extensive catalog and honestly top 10 in my opinion. I absolutely adore this song. Despite critics loving the song and heavy radio airplay, Columbia Records did not promote the song because it quote-unquote did not generate crossover appeal. Because of this and other factors, Breakdown was ineligible to chart on the Hot 100. Mariah herself attributed her label's lack of push of the song to their anti-R&B stance when it came to her music, as they had a notorious history of not pushing her heavy R&B material ever since her debut album. The Roof Back in Time was released as a third single in Europe, fourth overall, on March 16, 1998. Yet another absolute gem from Mariah, this song has a hypnotic, smooth hip-hop beat accompanied by Mariah's sultry vocals that detail an intimate rooftop encounter between two lovers. The song was later revealed to be about Mariah's relationship with baseball player Derek Jeter, whom she kissed for the first time on top of the roof of his apartment building, inspiring the song. I was so caught up in the moment, I couldn't bear to let you go yet, so I threw caution to the wind and started listening to my longing heart, and then you softly pressed your lips to mine, and feelings surfaced I suppressed for such a long, long time, and for a while I forgot the sorrow and the pain, and melted with you as we stood there in the rain. In my opinion, The Roof is honestly one of the greatest songs ever written. Unfortunately, it became yet another casualty of Mariah's then feud with her record label, as they refused to give it an official release in most markets or promote it. It peaked in the UK at number 87. In 2022, for Butterfly's 25th anniversary, Mariah re-recorded a reimagining of the song with Brandy titled The Roof, When I Feel the Need. The fifth and final single from Butterfly was the R&B ballad My All, released on April 21, 1998. It was the first song Mariah recorded for Butterfly. Like The Roof, the song is inspired by her relationship with Derek Jeter. Despite being the fifth single from Butterfly, My All was only the second single to receive widespread release and promotion from her label after they essentially ignored the last three singles. It debuted at number 2 on the Hot 100 and eventually topped the chart, becoming Mariah's 13th number 1 single in the United States, making her the female artist with the most number 1 singles ever and 4th overall. Mind you, this was just a mere 8 years into her career. Despite being released during a tumultuous time in both Mariah's career and personal life, Butterfly was an international success and received critical acclaim. Critics and fans alike embraced Mariah's musical transition. The album is certified 10 times platinum and has to date sold 10 million copies worldwide. The motif of a butterfly has become a symbol for Mariah Carey, being synonymous with the singer herself. Prior to this album, many critics regarded Mariah as a bland, overproduced, clean-cut pop singer, but Butterfly truly felt like the first time that she could authentically be herself in her music. Butterfly was in many ways a soft reset for Mariah. She was finally free to spread her wings and live her own life, creatively and personally. There was a certain authenticity in this album and subsequent releases that you just didn't see in her first few albums. And that's not to say that her pre-Daydream material wasn't good, but I personally enjoy everything from Butterfly onwards because it honestly sounds like something that Mariah truly wanted to make. Many of her most popular songs that came out prior to Daydream could have honestly been given to other female pop singers and still have been hits in their own right. However, no other artist on this planet could have done Butterfly. There's a certain beauty in rawness and authenticity, and it's that same rawness and authenticity that gave birth to one of the greatest R&B albums of all time.